Leah will be starting our first presentation today. I will pass it on to Leah. We'll do a quick Q&A afterwards, and then Audra will be doing the second half of the presentation. Any questions before we get started? All right. Leah, are you good to go?
Good to go. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. Ashlyn, thanks for organizing. Thanks to ALTEC and for inviting me. I'm looking forward to sharing a bit. Mine is sort of structured. I'll share my screen. I'll show, I sort of designed a few like mock-up activities that could be used and projects and things like that. So I'll start with a little introduction and then move to, these are just obviously sort of templates that could be used with other languages, other classrooms. These are just, they're a little specific to French, of course. That's what I've taught for the past 8 years at CU, of varying levels of language courses and culture and literature. So yeah, I'll share my screen here. Let's see. Is this the one I want? Okay, can everyone see? Okay, good. I'll actually start it here. I'm going to leave it on not slideshow mode because I also have some notes next to it. So it's okay. It's the slides aren't really the main part anyway. So I'll just kind of start here. So I wanted to say a few things first to get started. The first part is that I think it's pretty common in language classes now is the norm to speak only in the target language. And I wanted to just address that I think that is obviously proven to be very effective. I think that's the preferred method. But I also think that a few discussions throughout the semester being in English or in, not being in the target language is also really beneficial. Of course, learning a language, you're also being introduced to a whole new culture and world. And so I think a few discussions that can be geared towards culture and social justice and all these different big topics throughout the semester is okay. It doesn't take away from all the experience in the target language. So it's just something I was thinking about when when we sort of started talking about this workshop, is just that it can be tricky. And I think people right away think, that's not possible for students to be learning about these bigger issues when they can, they're just learning how to say their name and where they're from. And that can be true, but I think that, it doesn't hurt to also have some in English. So the next piece here in the introduction is just, again, early language learning and social justice issues. I think these are not mutually exclusive. Even before students have the language to express things, they're getting acquainted with certain issues right from the start. So I'm going to, from my own experience in French, talk a little bit about the French language being very gendered. So this could be literally week 1 or 2, students start learning subject pronouns. So every noun in French has a gender, of course. Every adjective has to agree in quantity and gender with the noun. And so even subject pronouns, you have il and elle, you have the masculine, feminine. So this is already just an entryway to start thinking about what's going on in France. Do they have a gender neutral pronoun? There's already just so many questions that can come up for students in a good way, a way we can start thinking about. There is on in French, but it's a sort of like not so humanizing. It's a little bit like one does this, one does that. So yeah, there's a gender neutral pronoun that's more and more common and popular, especially among young people, and it's il. It combines il and elle, the masculine and feminine. So we'll see in my first activity. I'll sort of do the intro, then show the activity. But yeah, right away. I mean, they're learning il and elle, so now they're familiar with the subject pronouns. And this is already an entryway into start, we can start thinking about these things in a language classroom. One other piece of this introduction is that language is so fluid. I think something that happens in maybe early language is students are learning in such a systematic way. It's sort of like they think that language is static, where I'm just learning the rules and the grammar, and this is how it is. but it's evolving, it's ambiguous, it's always changing. So to even talk about learning it in some uniform way can spark curiosity, because a textbook, even if it's 10 years old, language-wise, that can be an eternity. And even this language is such a huge topic today in terms of online platforms, social media, language sort of policing, cancel culture, creative ways that young people are playing and manipulating language. Not only young people, but that tends to be the group that's pioneering the new slang, as we can just turn to our Gen Z friends to find out all this new language that's happening. So yeah, just a piece to keep in mind that relates to me to how language is political and changes based on the feelings and beliefs of a certain group. And finally, I hope this leads to discussion, but I wanted to just share that I think in a language classroom, especially when it comes to these bigger issues, it's really important to lead with curiosity and not maybe like agenda driven. Like, we can obviously feel a certain way about these things, but the activities I drew up are meant to just sort of start introducing students to what topics are, what are the big topics in different French speaking countries, for example, what kinds of organizations, nonprofits are there, what issues are being discussed. And it's true that maybe they don't have sophisticated enough language right off the bat to be discussing police brutality, immigration policies, racism, gender roles, disabilities in their second, third, fourth language. But I think that, yeah, the way I designed the activities just to show is that just to, yeah, for exploration and curiosity, and not too much like this is being like implemented, this is how you must think and feel, but just what's out there, what can we discover. So with that, I will show here, these are sort of mock-ups of like, yeah, three, I call them activities. It's actually like activity, project, in class discussion type of thing. So the first one I have is what I just mentioned with IEL. So France's prominent Le Petit Robert dictionary, considered a linguistic authority in the country, recently added a new pronoun to its online edition. The word is IEL, a gender-neutral merging of the masculine il, feminine elle. The new pronoun, intended for those who identify as neither male nor female, is already used online and by younger generations. But the move to include it in the dictionary provoked a backlash from politicians and linguists. Our vocal critic of the new pronoun is French Education Minister Jean-Michel Blanquer. He says it's the latest expression of wokisme, which he claims threatens France's universalist model. So this is sort of the YouTube description. I found this video. I don't need to like play it all. I'm just showing here. So these, and yeah, France 24, this is an English discussion, but there is French in it. I thought it seemed like a great resource. It's 6 minutes long. And they cover a lot of topics. Like I just read, they talk about IEL being put into the dictionary and who's in favor, who's against. And I think this short video can just already start showing a lot of the maybe cultural differences or generational differences. And then that way they get also a little exposure to French in that way. So what I have here, sorry, let me just move this down. It's just not going back. Hold on. Move this over. There we go. Okay, so I obviously have this. This is sort of for our purposes. This could look a little different in the classroom, but discussion questions. What I imagined is we could just either watch the video all together, or maybe we do a sort of flipped model. Maybe they've watched it already, and then in class we discuss in more detail. So the discussion questions could also again include some French and English. And even though like they may not have all the elements to know these questions, I can include them in English if they're too advanced or whatever. But then they're still seeing both. It's not completely English focused. But just asking questions about the video. What did they understand? What is yel? What does it mean? What are the arguments in favor of this pronoun? What are the professions of the people, who oppose it? Because they have all these interviews throughout the video. And yeah, and then starting to talk about wokisme. This is a really common term in French right now, and I think it would be really interesting for students since it comes from the English woke. And yeah, it could just be a really interesting discussion. And like I said, even though it's an early language class, it still has elements of French. But yeah, I think we need to, I always feel like I want to give the students a lot of credit, and they want to discuss these things. They want to learn different, cultures and elements of the political landscape. Yeah, so that was sort of the first thing I had in mind, is just a short, using different sort of multimedia, using a video, but then having a discussion in English, but it has so many elements of the French culture. So that would be sort of activity one. So something else I had in mind. So in our language classrooms, in the French department, we often do these projects where they have both a research element and then a presentation. They do a short presentation on something. So I was thinking more about that, and yeah, imagined why not la justice sociale. So basically, the objective of this project would be that each group chooses an organization in a French-speaking country. This could be a nonprofit, something whose like some organization whose goals are maybe political and social justice driven. So I imagined it as just the first step. They do some research and choose an organization, something they're interested in. This could also be adjusted. Maybe you just sort of give each group an organization. So then they do research. And again, even though it would be in English, is what I'm imagining. It might be hard, even after a full semester, it could be hard to put these together in French. Maybe they have to do a few minutes in French. Maybe they introduce the organization in French. It can just be a hybrid, and I think that's still okay. So then they would research the organization, explore their mission, goals, history, achievements, current projects or campaigns, who they serve. And even I imagine this research element leading them to discover again what issues tend to come up the most. What are the really like hot button issues in different French speaking countries? They might even just discover that a bit while they're doing this research and choosing one. So then they sort of compile this information for both a written component and a presentation, including, like I just mentioned here, mission and vision, history, current initiatives, the impact, challenges, and then ways to get involved. How does this group, sort of market itself? Are there volunteer opportunities, fundraising, etc.? So then this would also have a presentation element. And again, I think it could be a neat idea to just have a little bit in the target language. They're still having to sort of piece together certain elements. But then the bulk of it could be in English. It's still, it's still culture. You're still learning about different places, which is a huge part of learning a language as well. And the last part I thought would be interesting, and I'm trying to incorporate more in my classes lately, is sort of this reflection. So after they do the research and the presentation, to reflect on that experience, what did you learn about that organization? Why did you choose it? Has it impacted your understanding? Just a little bit of that external, like meta, where they're kind of thinking, what did this bring? What did this offer? How did I learn something from it? Do you feel motivated to support or get involved with these organizations in the future? Yeah, anything to sort of have them reflect on that whole experience and the organizations they found. So I just sort of drew it up as they'd have these submission guidelines, the grading criteria, and all the sort of logistic pieces. And the last one is probably a lot of you are familiar with a film, La Haine. So in a few of my classes, I have been incorporating like a film analysis, meaning that we just learn some vocabulary that has to do with cinema. Because I think once you have the language in French and English, I'll show this document here, you can actually, with just a little bit of practice and vocabulary, you can do quite a bit of analysis and see that, oh, this camera angle is actually showing that it's really claustrophobic. They're stuck in this space, or it's a bird's eye view. And so you can just see that you know, they're sort of stuck in confined spaces and we're watching from above, or there's all kinds of elements. And I think the students really engage with film. I mean, this is obviously an amazing one that I've had good experiences with it. So I guess I'll show this in a second, but here I just drew up an entire like French and English or glossary of terms that have to do with cinematography, camera angles. Just that way it's not an entire unit on film, but we can maybe in a week, you know, watch a movie, use the vocab and do a project or an activity with it. Excuse my sort of, I put in notes from a class that I taught, and it's a little scattered, but I just wanted to include it to show that what I did was have like, I think we did 3 or 4 scenes that are a few minutes long. We would watch them and talk about all these different terms and what this film is actually saying by the camera use. A lot about, you know, the banlieue, the projects of Paris, police brutality. It gets them thinking about, you know, different issues, especially I think this one is a good example because a lot of the students come in and know a bit about Paris, let's say, and have sort of maybe these like stereotypical or romanticized visions of Paris. And this is an important way to be like, you know, languages and cultures and places are more than just the sort of snippets that you might have collected so far. You know, it's so much bigger than that. So yeah, this could be something where, yeah, any kind of media or film, having a little bit of vocab and then just, yeah, having a discussion on it throughout the class. And after the students do some analysis of the actual cinematography, let's say, then I have these discussion questions. This could be really any format, you know, just in class, if you have a nice chatty class who wants to say, you know, wants to speak up, or this could be written reflection and they could just sort of respond to these on their own time. Yeah, these can all just, it was just sort of mock-up template ways that I started thinking about how these issues can already be discussed, but still using resources and French speaking tools. Yeah, that is it for me. I'll stop sharing here.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, that was really informative. Does anyone have questions or thoughts, comments for Leah?
I'm open to all of it.
They can either go in the chat or you can feel free to unmute.
And also I figured if there was nothing like right in this moment, we can also, if someone wants to type it and save it for the end, that's fine too, but.
I have a thought on using gender neutral pronouns. This is Colleen. Sorry I don't have my video on. But I have been teaching Spanish and French for the last few years, and so both of those are gendered languages as well. And I've had students ask me, you know, they identify as non-binary and what should they do when they're speaking a gendered language. And what I've told them is just like, feel free to change it up. Of course, there is like in French, the pronoun yel. In Spanish, there's like ella. There are options for them, but I've actually had students just kind of like flip-flop, pick and choose. One day they're going to identify with the feminine. One day they're going to identify with the masculine, and I let them know that they are free to do that.
That is great. I'm so glad you shared that. Yeah, I think, Colleen, I don't remember if you were still there when Steph was in our department.
Yes.
We had a chat about this as well, as like, yeah, sharing to the students that unfortunately it is masculine and feminine. So you can just sort of, yeah, whatever you're feeling that day, and, you know, we'll like adjust the adjectives accordingly. And yeah, I would be curious to hear more about your experience with that. We could probably chat afterward, but I'm so glad you brought it. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else before we move on to Audra's presentation?
Just it was cool. I coordinate a 5th semester, so a little bit more advanced.
Sure.
For graduate students, but I've also been reviewing some things for ACTFL's presentations, and I really like that you're reminding everybody that you can deal with what they're interested in, that curiosity part to guide, and not just stick with the old fashioned. So just not really questions, just praise. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, it feels like if there's only one takeaway from all these years of teaching so far, it's just like to have, yeah, to build the curiosity on their own instead of it feeling like you have to do this, listen to us. It's been more fruitful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. And yeah, if anybody has questions between now and the end, we can circle back to Leah at the end as well. Audra, are you ready for us? Let's switch.
Yes, yep. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Oh,
Just one moment, sorry. I am not able to see Audra large on my screen.
I just fixed it now. I just put her spotlight on.
Yeah, it's still not showing her large for me. If everyone could turn your cameras off just while she's presenting so I can see her really big, that would be very helpful. Thank you so much. Okay, hey, I am Audra, and this is my second semester here at CU Boulder as an ASL instructor. So thank you so much for inviting me to provide this short workshop for you. I'll be talking about how to integrate culture and social justice into language, more specifically for ASL, but this can be applicable for any language. I'm used to just having, I'm using just one monitor here, so this is a little bit difficult for me here, but typically our class includes history because that can help with the students in general, not just who is deaf or people learning ASL, but it could help in deaf education. It could help with speech, with audiology. We talk about history, for example, when the first deaf school was established, where ASL comes from, when closed caption was presented for televisions, when the ADA was passed. These are things that I really emphasize in my ASL 1 in the first level of ASL, so students know how to provide or improve access for general population. And like I mentioned, accessibility. I ask students what accessibility means for the deaf and hard of hearing population. And when I ask them, they typically are unable to answer, which is a good opportunity for me to really ask them, what about ringing a doorbell? What does that look like for a deaf or hard of hearing person? It involves flashing lights or closed captions. How do you know if closed captions are successful or not? So that really allows us to engage on those topics. And I always enjoy sharing fun facts. Like Leah mentioned, anything related to what students might be curious about. Maybe I'll share about music. And students are often shocked. Oh, deaf people actually like music? Yes, we do. And there are deaf bands, deaf music groups, deaf singers. And so I show videos about those things, which sparks their curiosity. And I show them that statistics show that deaf drivers are actually better than hearing drivers. And I ask them why they think that may be. So I'm able to get their perspective. You know, we use our eyes and our peripherals more as deaf people, while hearing people rely solely on their sense of hearing. And so it's really nice to see students' minds open up to these possibilities and facts. There's something called deaf Bing that I bring up in class because, you know, this can cause a lot of misunderstanding. For example, those in ASL, in deaf culture, we typically use hand waving, tapping on the body, and in general, people may be sensitive to that, or in hearing culture, that might not be something that happens often. And so I want to use that opportunity to spread awareness of what we do in deaf culture. And I have kitchen listed here. So if you go to a social event, what you notice is deaf people, they congregate in kitchens. And the reason for this is because that's where the lighting is typically the best. Or maybe that's where drinks are. And so you can put your drink down on the counter or the table in the kitchen and use both of your hands to communicate. And so I like to expose them to these facts because I don't want there to be misunderstandings, wrong assumptions, or assuming that things are inappropriate when it comes to deaf culture and the things that we typically do. And I also talk a lot about deaf standard time because deaf people typically never finish our communications, our conversations within 5 minutes. They're never short. And I like to talk about that because when I'm done teaching, I don't always finish right on time. I keep on going, and that's deaf culture. And so I sprinkle these into my weekly lectures or my daily conversations based on what our schedule is. When we talk about accessibility, that's an opportunity for me to encourage students to attend workshops, trainings, encouraging them not to just get points for their grade, but for them to be aware and also help spread awareness for the deaf community that accessibility is very, very important. And some examples of this are the Super Bowl that just happened. And I haven't had this discussion with my students yet, but they did see the Super Bowl. On the Super Bowl, typically there's a smaller screen within the larger screen with the interpreter. And it seems like, you know, the community saw that that exposure was very, very brief. It was only shown for 1 second. And so that's a good opportunity to spread awareness about accessibility and inaccessibility. Deaf Bing or deaf tendencies. During that conversation, I talk about expression. Sometimes the hearing community thinks that when deaf people are speaking, they're angry when we're not, and it's just a function of our language. And so it's really important to continue to expose them to these facts so there are no misunderstandings. And how we can include things like this. We can use social media. Today, as we know, everything is on social media, which is great. And at the same time, we have to be very careful because we don't want to spread misinformation. Some social media platforms are inaccurate or they're not spreading appropriate information, like BASL, which stands for Black American Sign Language. I always look to find videos that are founded by researchers, Black deaf people, Black deaf researchers, because it's their history and it's their culture, which is what I want to put on the platform. Same with LGBTQIA. There are so many social media accounts, and these are people who create videos from their own communities, and I always want to be using the appropriate videos to give platform and give rise to the appropriate community from within their own community. Because we don't want to harm that community or cause misunderstandings or miscommunications. And I'll talk a bit more about that in curriculum in the next slide. And like I mentioned, encouraging these students or providing mini workshops for them, mini trainings within my classroom to help them to spread correct information and awareness. Maybe my students have family, friends who are doctors, police officers, EMTs. And so hopefully the information that they're giving in my class can be passed along to those friends and those family members who are in those roles. I have a short video here that I plan to show at the very end. And it's a great example for our Vice President, Kamala Harris, to give her a sign name. It was a point of conversation within the deaf community. And not just anyone can choose a sign name for somebody. It's based on somebody's identity. So she is a Black Native American woman. And so in the community, we look for people who represent those identities, Black Native American women who are able to choose those sign names for her. And once they decide that, it gets spread throughout the community. So Kamala Harris, her sign name has become this. And the reason for that is it represents a flower. And this is a tri-identity. So N3 is what it kind of looks like. So it's like a flower blossoming, representing she's a woman, a Native American, and she's Black. And so I just want to make a point here to be very careful which resources you share, make sure that they are appropriate, and there's no misunderstandings or miscommunications or misinformation being spread. So my curriculum, one of the oldest books that we use to learn ASL, it's very, very old, and it's a good place to start. However, it's very two-dimensional. There's no 3-dimension to this learning material, and ASL itself is a 3-dimensional language. And so it took time to improve the materials. There's not enough BIPOC representation in these old educational materials. There's no social justice elements to it, but they are very popular. And we are now using a different curriculum called Signing Naturally, which is great, but it's a book, again. It's not video content. There are some videos, but it requires CD-ROMs. And who has a DVD player these days? Probably no one. So that's where, we need to reach out to these editors, these people who make these books, publishers, and we need to ask for more modernized materials. So just recently, they were able to modify several units, but it took them 2 to 3 years to modify that. So these publishers' materials, they take time to modify, and things are always changing, and social justice issues are always changing. So we need to make sure that our materials are on track with that. We're now moving towards a different curriculum, which has become really popular since 2020 because of COVID. And this is a digital curriculum, and there are a lot of very cool videos available for it, and there's a range of ages that are shown in the videos. I feel like the youngest is 16 to maybe people in their 70s. So it really shows the importance of exposure to a variety of ages, regions, accents, and it includes more BIPOC representation and LGBTQIA population as well. TWA, the True Way ASL, is pretty cool because typically what I do is on Mondays, students will watch a snapshot video, which is a short, like 2 to 5 minute video, which will talk about a variety of things like when the TTY became widely used, how it came about in the 1970s, and what it looks like now, the evolution of that technology and how deaf people use video phone on our mobile devices, changes in culture, issues of social justice, BASL, and changes in BASL, Black American Sign Language, and why it's not used often anymore. There are a lot of misunderstandings about it. People aren't exposed to these topics often, and so I really like True Way. It's very important as an ASL instructor and just in language to look at your curriculum, and obviously you can always add things to your curriculum. However, I've noticed all of my students, they still have all of their old books. They bring those to me and they say, hey, this is what I learned. This is what I learned. And I have to tell them, well, today it's different. You cannot sign that anymore because it's inappropriate. And so that's where True Way, every semester, we do catch mistakes in the curriculum, or maybe they change a sign or a sign has changed, and we reach out to them and they make those modifications at the end of every semester. They update that in real time, and they can do that because it's all digital. So what to look for in curriculum? Make sure it includes diversity. That is so, so important. Some students think that all deaf people are the same, and that is not the truth. Some of us are born deaf and we learn ASL right away. Some deaf people learn ASL later in life. Some people are late deafened. So it's really important to have that diversity in the curriculum. We really want to include LGBTQIA and BIPOC represent those communities, excuse me. And for ASL, I want to make sure that it's a 3D curriculum. That's so crucial because it's a 3D language. I mentioned TrueWay being able to update their curriculum quickly and provide accurate information. The cool thing about TrueWay is they do have an ASL dictionary that's included in the curriculum. So believe it or not, some signs have vary depending on location. So birthday, I'll give you this sign, birthday. Here we say that birthday like this, and in Pennsylvania on the East Coast, you might see birthday signed like this. So it looks differently. In Indiana, you might see birthday like this, you know, like candles on a cake. The old sign from the 60s and 70s, you still see older deaf people signing birth, day, which are the signs for birth and day, and putting those together. So one thing I really love about TrueWay is they include all of those varieties and all of those regionalisms, which is very important to me. Include a variety of identities, as has already been mentioned. Not everybody has the same accent. Not everyone has the same identity. People have their own preferred pronouns, and that is all in the TWA curriculum, the TrueWay curriculum. ASL is a language that requires expressive and receptive skills. So the really nice thing about this curriculum is there's a lot of receptive practice, receptive videos that are available. So they're not only learning from watching me. They might not be very interested in me. I might not be a suitable teacher for them, but TrueWay has a variety of videos, a variety of people and identities where they can watch, and maybe some of those signers are better fit for those students. Also, there's captioning that's available in the curriculum. So I like to use that in my lectures. So using that, both of them helps them acquire the language more fully. And so I like to make sure that we have activities that are both focused on receptive skills and expressive skills. Oh, all right. Wow, the end of my slideshow. Any questions? Let me go ahead and stop sharing.
I have a question. So I'm admitting total ignorance here. Do deaf students take foreign languages at universities or in secondary and primary schools?
I know that there are some deaf friends who do take Spanish and French, but really they're learning to write and read the language, not necessarily to speak it. But there are, yes, they do take them, and some people find great enjoyment in that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Chaining off of that question, there are different sign languages in different countries, right? American Sign Language is one, but so if you learn American Sign Language and then you travel internationally and want to do some kind of international outreach, what steps do you need to take to then have the ability to use sign language in other countries? Is it a completely different language? Is there an international sign language? What's that like?
Yes, so that is one thing that I like about today's curriculum is it does include one unit that lists the different countries and their different signs. And we do have resources. Yes, they are completely different languages, signed languages in the other countries. There is a universal sign language. There is one, but I think, there are already resources. You can watch videos on your own time. You can watch things before you travel and just get some exposure to those things in other countries and their cultures, related to their signed languages and their deaf communities there. You don't want to assume that those communities are all of the same. So some countries have a very different perspective on deaf people and deaf communities than the US or other countries. So you just kind of want to make sure that you're exposed to what is appropriate there.
I found it very interesting that language changes through age. I mean, that's the case, of course, for the languages that we teach as well. But it seems particularly pronounced. It was particularly pronounced in the examples that you gave with birthday, and I'm wondering how much time is allocated in your classroom for making sure that students are sensitized to that, to these differing languages depending on age, and how much attention is given to actually representing these different age-specific words and phrases.
Yeah, so that is challenging. And I always want to emphasize, like here in the Midwest, typically we sign this. So that's kind of how I'll present it. And then on the East Coast, they'll sign it this way. On the West Coast, they sign it this way. And so just trying to get that exposure to those students so that it might not be the same as what you learn here in the Midwest. And this curriculum, that was created in Austin, Texas. So obviously they have their own regional dialects and signs there. So it was a learning curve for me going through this new curriculum. So I had to learn the hard way what the curriculum shows, and then I can make sure. So for example, I have to remind myself for the vocabulary, like within the parentheses, there are 3. So that means there's 3 different signs. So by that word, vocab word, in parentheses, it'll have a 3. That means there's 3 different signs that I need to teach them so that they're aware of those differences, those regional differences. And it's really important to make sure and emphasize that with the students, because some signing, if you sign something incorrectly, it can cause really big misunderstandings. So with ASL, you really want to be careful that students are producing signs in a correct manner so there aren't those big miscommunications.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? I see something in the chat. Two comments in the chat. In my Intro to Linguistics course, we talk about language discrimination and ideologies related to standard languages. I introduce VASL and show part of this documentary, Signing Back in America. It's really well done. I'm curious, Audra, if you are familiar with the documentary.
Let me look at it again. It's yes, that is a good one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the second comment, that reminds me of the move to teach world English in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. We have to be mindful not to teach one variety only, so that learners are ready to communicate across a range of varieties, accents, etc. Yeah, great example.
Yeah, and also, it's just another point of emphasis is the accents. For 2 different ASL users, depending on their region, they might have different accents. So age is almost the same kind of concept. But yeah, people who are from the East sign a little bit differently. And then, and that can transfer from ASL 1 to ASL 2. You can have 2 different teachers who might come from different backgrounds. So let's just want to make sure within the curriculum that we're all on the same page as well by teaching those different regional signs.
I have another question, and I feel like this is a really big one that could, we could spend a whole other workshop talking about it. But I'm just wondering if a deaf student came to my classroom. I've really been focusing in the last year on how to include all types of learners. I have a blind student currently for the first time, and that's been really rewarding working with him and seeing that he can still work with the language without being able to see it. I'm wondering, do you have any ideas for general ways to accommodate a deaf student in a world language classroom that involves so much speaking in class?
Well, I haven't personally taken another language class. I'm looking back, I was thinking about a friend. She spoke with a teacher about replacing speaking with different kinds of work. So she gave more reading assignments, more writing assignments, things that were more visual, like videos or books and articles from magazines. Um, yeah. Uh, and some, audiobooks, maybe just make sure and find ones that are actual books that can be read if it's an audiobook. So you might be able to try and find a sign language interpreter who's also fluent in that language. So there may be a trilingual interpreter, and then they might be able to help accommodate that and come up with some ideas on how to go about that.
Thank you. I also wonder if maybe there are certain students who are not deaf, but they prefer reading and writing to listening and speaking. Maybe I could scan the class for the students who have that preference and partner them up in group work with deaf students while other students are engaging in oral conversation. I could have the students who prefer reading and writing do a more writing focused activity covering the same content at the same time in the same classroom. I wonder if that
Right.
would work.
Yeah. 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 Some people do learn well more visually, not just auditorially. So I think that, just stepping outside of that box, thinking of using all of the senses, not just the ears and the mouth, or thinking you can using your eyes too. Yeah, I think that those are all possibilities. And you maybe can give someone more credit if they're having to work more often, or, if they're working on a specific project, if it just has a little bit more time intensive or something, you maybe think about adding a little more credit for that.
Thank you. I guess one last thought on that, something I have done when I give projects to students that they do outside of class, I always give them the choice of modality. So I give like slightly different instructions and slightly different requirements for a spoken versus written component, or spoken versus written format. So that I also think would be a great way to accommodate deaf students in a world language classroom.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Great.
Thank you. We do have a few more minutes if anybody has other questions, thoughts, comments, or even going back to Leah's presentation, if anybody has a question for Leah as well. I think I have a question for both of you, whoever wants to answer first, but since ALTEC also likes to focus a lot on technology, do you have technology like apps or games or different materials that you like to use for your classes? Or technological materials, I should say.
Yeah, I can go. I do have a list of apps that can be used, social media people to follow for their content. In class, I don't really utilize that very much, especially for the first 2 levels of ASL. I tend to use more of the whiteboard and writing things down for communication. But yeah, it's not really related to technology. The other technology I typically use in class involves Kahoots, the Kahoot games. So just to get them more engaged visually, I will use that occasionally.
Thank you. Leah, do you have any favorites?
Yeah, of course, yes. Kahoot, Quizlet, Padlet, for in-class things. And then I often, for outside of class, recommend to students, yeah, a variety of different YouTube people, podcasts, any exposure to French, like I'm always telling them just like the more accents and variety of language you can have, all these different, we like to like play songs for them, introduce them to different artists and films. Yeah, but in class, yeah, definitely a variety of games. And as I shared, sort of using even just YouTube clips, different news sources are often, just they have little sort of art equivalent of like NPR or something, to engage with more like with what am I looking for? Like authentic language. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, one last chance if anybody has another question. I'm putting a few things in the chat. There's a survey that I would love if everyone could take a minute or two to fill out. And then the recording for this workshop will be posted on our YouTube and on our webpage where we have faculty learning. So you can share it with colleagues if you would like to. And the first button is the subscribe to ALTEC button if you're not subscribed yet. I want to thank everyone, our presenters. Thank you, Audra, and thank you, Leah, for sharing all of your wisdom with us, and all of these amazing resources, activity ideas, etc. And I want to thank everyone for attending as well and spending an hour with us this afternoon. Feel free to stick around if anybody has any questions. Again, thank you so much. And thank you to our interpreters as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ashlyn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Leah, I would love to follow up if you'd like to. It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Yeah, let's definitely connect.
Will do. Take care.
Thanks. See you, Colleen.
Bye-bye.